The reason why I find this particularly important is because I want you to see what is actually happening, and I want you to see how the media is trying to run a very different reality of when all of the facts show you the exact opposite reality. No guarantee that a ceasefire agreement will come through, says Blinken.
Antony Blinken came to the region to sell a ceasefire plan unveiled by the president and endorsed by the UN Security Council. Joe Biden says it was an Israeli proposal, but there were conflicting narratives.
That's really interesting because they say it was an Israeli proposal, but Antony Blinken earlier today said something along the lines of he had a weak moment, I guess, and was like, this is the same proposal since May 6th that Hamas presented. Did you guys see that? I thought that was really funny, where they just had like a big homie had a moment of weakness. Hold on. Dude. Speaking from Doha after meeting with the Prime Minister of Qatar, Blinken said Hamas proposed numerous changes to the proposal that was on the table. Some of the changes are workable and some of them are not. He argued the deal currently under discussion is almost identical to the one Hamas itself proposed on May 6th. It was a deal that Israel accepted and the world was behind. Hamas could have answered with a single word, yes. That's strange. Wait a minute. I thought this was an Israeli deal. That's odd. Huh. The reason why I think this back and forth and the media coverage of it in the Western world and the State Department officials and the way that they reflect upon the minutia of this deal, the reason why I find this particularly important is because I want you to see what is actually happening, and I want you to see how the media is trying to run a very different reality, a false narrative that they're presenting, backed by the State Department, when all of the facts show you the exact opposite reality. Why is this important, though? It's not just important to understand manufacturing consent here. It's also important to remember this when reading about the so-called peace process that many people have written extensively on, because the entire peace negotiations process and the way that people learn about it here in the United States is damn near identical to miscommunication and the outright lies presented by American members of the negotiation team versus what the reasonable demands that Arafat or the Palestinian side had made versus the unreasonable demands that the Israeli side made that they also went back on time and time again. You need to personally recognize that this is precisely the reason why everybody, whenever someone immediately says, oh, Israel never could find a partner in peace, in the peace process, in the negotiations process, the so-called Palestinian peace process, this is something that you have to remember, okay? This is something that you have to remember. Palestinians are never negotiating in good faith. It's like, bro, what are you talking about? We're watching the American government take a Hamas proposal, stamp the Israeli sticker on it, say this is Israel's own proposal, while simultaneously we are watching the Israeli government itself directly say, F this proposal, we hate this proposal, we're going to keep bombing. And we're watching Israel continuously bomb Palestinian neighborhoods, Palestinian refugee camps in this supposed peace process that Israel presented. How strange. The only information we've gotten from the Palestinian side has been, we like this deal. We would like security assurances to make sure that this deal goes through. The most famous case is January 1st, 1979, Radio Baghdad calling on Iraqi Jews to return home in a Hebrew broadcast. There wasn't much demand for returning among Mizrahis at the time for a variety of complex reasons. There was always an internal conflict between the Zionist narrative that all Jews globally had been waiting to return to Israel for millennia and attempts by the Israeli government to frame Mizrahis as refugees in order to counteract the Palestinian right of return. Yeah, Avi Shlaim wrote extensively about this. He himself is an Iraqi Jew who is an Israeli historian. And his findings also show that Mossad, did I get it? I think I got it. Mossad participated in a synagogue bombing to escalate tensions and push the Iraqi Jews out of Iraq. If Israel's sticking point was the timeline on withdrawal and permanent ceasefire, then Israel effectively only agreed to phase one, right? They're only on board with a temporary ceasefire for hostage extraction? Yes. So, something to consider when looking at the way people discuss the history of the peace process. This is what happens when non-state actors or non-American affiliated actors in any kind of negotiations process does not get adequate or accurate coverage. Okay? Then the sides that are more powerful can make up whatever narrative they want to.
Israel has maintained its goal is to destroy Hamas, and Hamas wants a permanent ceasefire and the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. Well, today, Blinken has blamed Hamas for the impasse. He says the group's response to the plan last night came with amendments and that some of them are workable, some of them are not. He was addressing a press conference along with the Prime Minister of Qatar, which has been a key mediator between Hamas and Israel. Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani said a permanent ceasefire is the only viable solution for Gaza.
Hamas has proposed numerous changes to the proposal that was on the table. We discussed those changes last night with Egyptian colleagues and today with the Prime Minister. Some of the changes are workable, some are not.
Why don't you say what their demands are? Like, what are the changes that are workable and what are the changes that are not workable? Just say it. Why won't you say it, big dog? What's happening? The Baghdad bombings played an important role in driving Iraqi Jews to register for leaving in accordance with the denaturalization law. Whether it was done by the Zionist underground Mossad or other actors is not completely certain, though I find the evidence Schleim presents pretty convincing. I've literally had to argue with people who think that Hamas is the one holding up the negotiations is nuts. Well, remember, due to the sheer arrogance of the Israeli state and the sense of entitlement that the Israeli state has, they very openly revealed their actual opinions on the matter with regular frequency. So you can turn around and point to a million different articles written since Joe Biden came out and said this is the Israeli ceasefire negotiation. Hamas must accept it now, and point to those articles to be like, well, if this is Israel's own negotiation, why the is there 100 different news articles about like Benjamin Netanyahu going back on it? Tweets from Benjamin Netanyahu's own personal Twitter account saying, oh, no, don't worry, we're still going to bomb Gaza into oblivion. Or Benjamin Netanyahu's own party, Likud, having Knesset members go out to the media to be like, yeah, this shit sucks. This is a terrible deal. We don't want this. What? Take a week off. They even went as far as to run headlines for this story as Hamas rejects ceasefire. Yeah. Israel's war on Gaza live. Over 15,000 children killed as war hits day 250. At a press briefing in Qatar, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says some changes proposed by Hamas ceasefire deal are not workable. Gaza Ministry of Health warns hospitals, health centers, and the only oxygen station in Gaza City governorate are at risk of going out of service due to a lack of fuel. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad say they submitted a response to the UN-backed ceasefire proposal to mediators in Qatar and Egypt. Homes, hospitals, schools, universities, agriculture, the economy devastated, and the bomb still falls, says a UNICEF official from inside of Gaza. Hezbollah announces that one of its senior commanders was killed in an Israeli attack on Lebanon. At least 37,202 people have been killed and 85,000 wounded in Israel's war on Gaza since October 7th. This is that we know of. Now, let's go back here. Scroll down to 6 hours. Bro, that's too much scrolling. That's too much scrolling. Gaza government media office marks 250 days of war. Hamas official denies requesting amendments to proposed Gaza ceasefire deal. Hamas official Osama Hamdan has denied that the Palestinian group had put forward new ideas for the U.S.-backed proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that Hamas had proposed numerous amendments, some unworkable, to the Gaza ceasefire proposal, though he also said mediators remain determined to close the gaps. Hamdan, speaking to the pan-Arab Al Arabi TV, also said that Blinken was part of the problem, not the solution in the Gaza conflict. That's interesting. Now, even if you're like, well, how can you trust Hamas saying that they didn't actually put forward new amendments to the deal? Okay? If you say, oh, how can you put forward this idea? Well, here it is. Here is Antony Blinken's own words in a moment of weakness, openly admitting that this was the same deal Hamas proposed. Hamas has not come out at all and stated that they do not want this deal. They have only stated so far since the Joe Biden revelation that there was a three-phase permanent cessation of hostility deal on the table, Hamas has only responded positively to this deal. And yet, the only people that say that this deal is only being held up by Hamas are American authorities. It's not even the Israeli authorities that are saying this. You want to know why? Until recently, Israeli authorities were openly stating they were the ones who were against this ceasefire proposal, even though they said it was their own ceasefire proposal, according to the American government. The analogy I gave last night holds. If you are going to a car dealership and you are telling the car dealership, the salesman, hey, I want this Honda Civic. Here's $30,000. The car dealership says the Honda Civic is $30,000. And then you're like, okay, set up the contract. And a day later, the dealership goes, what Civic? Just give me the money, dumbass. Give me the money. You get no car. We never said there was a car. That's not a deal. And you, as the person who is buying the Honda Civic, have every right to say, can I get assurances? Can I see the car? Can I get the car? The f do you mean there's no car? It is insane. Meanwhile, the car dealership is no longer giving you the car, demanding the $30,000, and also trying to take the car that you drove here on. And if you say, what the f is this? You're anti-Semitic. Shut the f up. I heard Sam Cedar talking about it being written in the deal. Basically, Israel, U.S. could back out after phase one after hostages are returned. Have you heard anything about this? Yes. The main point of contention is that Israel thought, because we don't know the exact details, but my speculation is that Israel thought that they could get away with like writing this three-part proposal and then muddying the waters after the end of phase one, after they extract all the hostages. But the problem is people want a permanent end to hostilities. Israel doesn't, but the rest of the international community does. So when Joe Biden came out and said three-phase deal, first phase ceasefire, second phase permanent end to hostilities, everyone is going to hyper-focus on that. And the legalese on this issue is not going to cause people to go, oh, well, Israel is actually playing fast and loose with these terms, and technically they have every right to do so, and they have every right to pull out of this deal. Well, that's bullshit. Then it's not a deal. It's not the same deal. Of course, people hyper-focused on permanent end to hostilities and a ceasefire because that's what people care about. They don't give a shit about Israel or specifically Benjamin Netanyahu's interest in continuing the bombing campaign or the Israeli interest in continuing the bombing campaign once the hostages are extracted. That's ridiculous. They're trying to also make the non-populated areas bit apply to the corridor they built so they don't have to actually withdraw their military. That's the other part. Yeah. They don't want to evacuate the Philadelphia corridor, which is ridiculous. They don't want to evacuate the areas that they've cultivated, that they've bombed into oblivion, by the way, between the border wall and the Gaza envelope. So of course, when Hamas officials say, okay, well, where are the assurances? We want a timeline of how this permanent cessation of hostilities is going to work. People go, oh, you're sullying the deal.
We have reached a very dire point whereby it is imperative to reach permanent solution rather than temporary measures. This was part of our discussion whereby we are all seeking permanent solution to bring back peace and security to Gaza Strip as well as West Bank, let alone the peoples of the region.
Well, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad sent their response to the US-backed proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza to the mediators on Tuesday. They sent their reply to the Qatari and Egyptian mediators on Tuesday night, and while the exact wording wasn't disclosed, they said the plan is, quote, responsible and positive. In a joint statement, they said the response prioritizes the interests of our Palestinian people and the necessity of completely stopping the ongoing aggression against Gaza and Israel's withdrawal from the entire Gaza Strip. The Palestinian delegation expressed its readiness to deal positively to reach an agreement to end this war against our people based on a sense of national responsibility. But they also proposed amendments to the overall proposal. Those changes include Israeli troops pulling out immediately from the Rafah border crossing and the Philadelphia corridor, which runs along the border with Egypt. Well, we are live in central Gaza, the Jordanian capital Amman, but first let's head to the White House and speak to Kimberly Halkett there. Kimberly, give us some context for this. Tell us what was in that ceasefire proposal.
the ceasefire proposal that was laid out back in May of the 31st certainly laid out various stages that the U.S. president hoped would be amenable to Hamas. Of course, we now know that there are changes that Hamas is looking for, some that the president says are workable, some that the Secretary of State says also are not workable. And so
what is it? Which one is it? What's going on here? I would like to personally know what the non-workable aspects of this deal are. Hasan, following your car analogy, are they trying to say that the assurances Hamas wants are changes even though they've always been there? Yes. That is precisely what I speculate is going on. This is wee-woo speculation alert. Judging by the weird communication from the American side and with the open revelation that this is Hamas's own deal, I suspect everything that I know, everything that I've seen so far, especially the inconsistencies from the American side on the messaging front and the consistency that I've seen on the Israeli front in terms of wanting to continue the bloodshed no matter the cost once the hostages have been extracted. I suspect that my speculation is that Hamas does not want to change the deal dramatically, simply wants assurances and a timeline. My suspicion on this matter, once again, comes from the inconsistency on the American front and the outright lies that the American government has presented as fact. The mainstream media in the Western world has gone along with these outright lies, by the way. And Hamas envoys have consistently said publicly that they are very they're open to this deal. They like it.
So this is something that the White House is now trying to work through. But as we know, the main goal in all of this is to try and end the conflict, something that has been an ongoing challenge. And the other main goal in all of this is to ease the suffering of the Palestinian people. As we know, there are now 37,000 casualties and rising. And to ease the suffering in terms of not only ending the fighting, but also to get humanitarian aid in. As we know, this is a humanitarian crisis. So in terms of the proposal, what we know is that there are three stages, one to end the fighting, one to bring out the withdrawal of Israeli troops, given the fact that this is Israel's war on Gaza, and also to get that humanitarian aid in the various increments. And so this is what the plan lays out. And in terms of this proposal, what we know from the U.S. president is that each step and each increment is one that builds upon in terms of trying to get to an ultimate solution of ultimately building on something lasting and enduring in the eyes of the White House.
Kimberly, many thanks for that. Kimberly Halkett, live at the White House in Washington, D.C. OK, for more on this story, let's go to Hamda Salhout, who's joining us from the Jordanian capital, Amman. Hamda, well...
Israel was demanding assurances for this over a week ago, basically guaranteeing to continue the war after the first stage. Yeah, Israel demands guarantees from the U.S. We can continue the war if Hamas delays the completion of the deal. The limited war cabinet decided to amend the American guarantees following the fear that the cessation of hostilities would allow Hamas to smear the contacts and avoid completing the deal. Senior government official, the decision may delay the negotiations. Israel needs to strike Lebanon now, says senior contributing editor at JNS, host of the Caroline Glick Show, and Newsweek columnist, author, speaker, mom, wife, dog mom. She says, Israel needs to strike Lebanon now, hard, before Iran goes nuclear. Biden's demands that Israel stand down is a demand that we accept our annihilation. To which Ryan Grimm correctly responds, okay, strike Lebanon now hard. Because why again? What do you have after you have struck Lebanon hard? How does that help? No. Strike Lebanon hard now, ? 3, profit. Yeah, it's just, there's one speed. When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And Israel is the hammer nation, okay? They only have one speed, and that is total annihilation.
The Biden administration has very clearly and repeatedly blamed Hamas for derailing any progress when it comes to a potential ceasefire. What is Israel's position on it?
Look, Neve, from the get-go, not just in this round of negotiations, but in all previous ones, the Israelis have pointed the finger at Hamas, saying that they have unreasonable and, quote, delusional demands. In this latest round of talks, Israeli officials...
This is the only way it could ever possibly pass in the expanded cabinet, and even then, I'm not sure Ben-Gvir would allow it. Law. It also fits with what we'd heard from Zaki Hanegbi's leaked convo with the hostage families. Of course, Hamas would never take it if it doesn't end the war. Yeah, obviously. And then they can turn around and say Hamas shall lead the talks. The problem is there's two different problems. If you are a Zionist and you want this and you hate that, like, Israel's propaganda efforts have fallen on deaf ears for the most part, specifically because Israel has been unimaginably brutal throughout this entire process, then you just fucking cross your fingers and you hope and you pray that the Western media will be able to manufacture consent to make it seem like it was Hamas that sullied the deal. The issue here, however, is that regardless of what the Western media says, people can still see with their eyes and recognize who's the one who's actually ruining the talks.
Have said that the Hamas proposal falls short of what exactly Israel is looking for. Additionally, we have to remember that even if all the captives were released, Israel has still said that the war would continue no matter how long a pause in the fighting would be. So that means that they're saying until all of those goals of the war are achieved, and remember there are three. The first is to release all of the remaining Israeli captives, to ensure that Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel, and the complete destruction of Hamas both politically and militarily. And Israel is saying until all of those goals are achieved, the war is not going to end. So Israel, again, pointing the finger at Hamas, saying that they are unwilling to meet Israel's demands, again, saying they're unrealistic.
All right, Hamda Salhid live for us in the Jordanian capital, Amman. Let's head to central Gaza and speak to Tariq Abu Zoom, who's outside the Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah. And Tariq, there has been a frustrating lack of progress, I think that's the best way of putting it, in terms of reaching a conclusion to these ceasefire hopes. And those hopes matter most where you are.
I like that the conversation openly is, give us all the hostages and we are going to keep bombing. Okay. Also, this is called a permanent end to hostilities plan. It's like, how can you make this? How can you make the population understand this? Like, I feel like no matter how much consent you seemingly try to manufacture, people can still be like, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? So you don't want to do the second phase of the deal? That makes no sense. Then you just want to keep bombing. You just want the hostages, and then you want to keep bombing as soon as you take the hostages out. That makes no sense. And you're refusing to give any assurances that you will not continue bombing. And as a matter of fact, have said the exact opposite. You've said that you will continue the bombing. That's not a deal then. You give us everything and we just keep killing you. That's not a deal.
Yeah, that's right. We generally right now following all the latest regarding the ceasefire deal that has been packed by the United States and presented for both Hamas and Israel in order to accept. But what we do hear from Palestinians is that they have a great sense of cautious optimism. It means that they do not want to feel ultimate optimism as multiple previous times where these kinds of negotiations have come and hit a dead end. But in contrast, they are trying to follow all the latest developments. They'd like to say that they are feeling the mounting American pressure and regional pressure on both Hamas and Israel in order to push deeper and to accept the deal that has been brought to the table that would guarantee an end for the fighting. But Hamas has presented some sort of amendments for the deal, represented and stressed on the fact that the Israeli army must completely withdraw from Gaza. Alongside, they must also withdraw from Philadelphia corridor. And for Palestinians, any deal that cannot really guarantee the return of the Palestinians to the north of the Strip, to where from.
But isn't this a good move from Hamas to give back the hostages and open the eyes to the rest of the pro-Israel people to show the brutality of the Israeli regime? Bro, 37,000 Palestinians have been murdered in the past 8 months. 86,000 Palestinians have been wounded. The majority are women and children in these casualty numbers that I'm telling you. Israel has also simultaneously destroyed all matter of civil infrastructure, including many sieges, on pretty much every single hospital. These are war crimes. Israel's refusing to let in humanitarian aid to this civilian population. That is also a war crime. Israel has also demonstrated genocidal intent since October 8. Israel's also acted out on said genocidal intent since October 8. The numbers that I gave you prove that reality. If those that want to defend Israel at this point are not recognizing Israel's brutality, giving the hostages, and then allowing Israel to continue its endless military incursion is not going to actually open anyone's eyes at all. The Palestinian civilians are, in many respects, a perfect victim, and yet it still has not opened anyone's eyes at all on the pro-Israeli side. If anything, they have reaffirmed their commitment to how this genocide must be conducted, and how anyone that actually is a naysayer in the process is seemingly either A, anti-Semitic, or B, Hamas operatives. This criticism has extended all the way from, someone like myself, anti-Semite of the week, a couple weeks prior, all the way to Joseph Robinette Brandon, Israel's greatest defender. Itamar Ben-Gvir made inferences that Joseph Robinette Biden, the current president of the United States of America, a lifelong committed Zionist who was, alive when Israel wasn't even a state, and has demonstrated time and time again how committed he is to Israel's violent, bloody affairs and the continuation of said apartheid regime and ethnic cleansing campaign. That man was called a Hamas lover. I don't think people who are at this stage still defending Israel are going to turn around and open their eyes to the brutality, especially considering that it is the brutality that they want. Israel's giving them the brutality that they're demanding.
Where they were displaced would be meaningless and even baseless due to their ongoing hardships and challenges resulted after that internal displacement that took place after Hamas October the 7th attack on the Israeli communities. And from the Israeli side, they insist on going with the option of renewing the war after the end of that deal, saying that they are so keen to militarily and politically dismantle Hamas alongside with the ongoing and growing pressure that they would like to make sure that Gaza won't be any more representing a threat for Israel. So there are still big gaps between both parts, but Palestinians believe that there are still more ongoing efforts being made by regional mediators, including Qatar. And
if Israel are bombing them with the hostages anyways, then what purpose do the hostages serve Hamas? Maybe returning them would put more pressure on Israel from the international community? No. Israel can't openly and maliciously murk every single hostage. I don't think you guys are aware of how much pressure has mounted against the current Israeli war cabinet and the current Israeli government internally inside of Israel as a consequence of Israel's relentless bombing campaign that has killed many of the hostages so far. Even people who want the bloodshed to continue still are like, what the fuck are you doing? Get the hostages out. Since the northern fires, everybody in Israel is having a who's a bigger Nazi competition. Education Minister Yoav Kish suggested the totally novel idea of pushing all of southern Lebanon's 400,000 residents beyond the Litani River, which would be called Operation Litani, if not for the 1978 Israeli operation of the same name. Smotrich has another original idea, a security belt from Israel to southern Lebanon. Ben-Gvir takes the cake with, the time has come for all of Lebanon to burn. Good stuff. Did the hostages being there prevent the IDF from bombing like maniacs anyway? I mean, Hamas got nothing to lose. The IDF will look more sinister than ever. As Rafah invasion was so hard to defend, like many pro-Israelis, we are not looking for a shift in these people's opinion, but rather less backing to the IDF by other governments. But no, you are out of your mind. Do you not hear what our Israeli chatter just reported on in terms of like Israel's appetite for more death and destruction? What the fuck are you talking about? That is insane. This isn't even specifically saying like Hamas is greatly rewriting the deal. You're literally saying, oh, if Hamas just releases the hostages in a show of good faith, Israel will stop being cruel because they've been so cruel so far, even with the hostages. That's insane. No one around the world is going to go, okay, they're perfect victims now. I genuinely don't understand. Hamas sucks. Yeah, well, Hamas sucks. Well, Israel is significantly worse, so I'm a lesser evil voter, chat. You guys know this.
Egypt to narrow the gaps of disagreement, but the grim reality for Palestinians as
if Israel invades Lebanon, all the world will turn against them. Yeah, I don't agree. I mean, the entire world could turn against Israel. It doesn't matter. There's only one country that cannot turn against Israel, and that is the United States of America. That's what matters more than anything else, okay? The United Nations, all of these other, the ICC, the ICJ, the UN, these guys are all simply vehicles for pressure, vectors for pressure. But beyond that, the only country that has motion in this process is the United States of America. Okay? It is the United States of America. If the United States of America says, all right, you're done, then that's it. It's over. Like, the rest of the world will turn on Israel even more than they have so far if they invade Lebanon. Certainly. Okay? That will then create even more pressure upon the United States of America. Israel would in fact nuke every country, Lamau. Bro, how about Israel nuke the top of the hour ad break? Which, by the way, you can also nuke by subscribing for $5 or for free. Okay? I think chat doesn't understand that using 2,000-pound bombs take out entire apartment blocks to go after two guys is Israel being careful. Once the hostages are out, they will just start cluster bombing random neighborhoods without restraint. No, I mean, I think they're already doing that. The goal is to make the Gaza Strip impossible to survive in. I'm half Palestinian, half Lebanese, and even though I live in the UK, my entire family's in southern Lebanon. I don't understand what Israel thinks will happen after killing 36,000 people in Palestine, then deciding that Lebanon should be next. They expect those who survive to just live with it and deal with it. Yet there's obviously going to seek revenge and bloodshed, and therefore Hamas and Hezbollah is back. Yeah. Did you hear about Hamas declined the peace agreement? Do you see the article title, the video that we're watching? No, Hamas didn't actually decline the peace agreement. If you read beyond the headlines, you will recognize that even Antony Blinken himself said this is Hamas's own peace agreement that they proposed, that they accepted on May 6th. People don't realize that some Lebanese Christian fascist groups would gladly welcome an invasion just to remove Hezbollah out of the picture. So yeah, not all the world will be against them. Yeah, people definitely don't realize that like what you're describing already happened and Israel lost. So what the fuck are you talking about? What does this take? Just because Israel wants to try out things that are seemingly new to you, chatter, doesn't mean that they haven't tried them out and failed before. Anyway, also, like I mentioned, here's the 3-minute ad break now. They have U.S. backing back then. There's never been a moment where Israel has not had United States backing.
we have been hearing from them, they want only a ceasefire that can help them to go back to the north of the Strip, get aid, and at the same time have a kind of mitigation for the aggravating humanitarian crisis that day by day is getting much more worse in light of the Israeli full tight closure of all crossing borders and the prevention of the flow of aid into the territory, which had posed more significant threats on the lives of Palestinians as the levels of malnutrition are increasing, in particular in the northern part of Gaza, and families here are depending on all kinds of commercial products that are affordable in the Palestinian market. So ceasefire now is what Palestinians are urgently needing in order to generally witness a sense of calm on the ground amid the Israeli ongoing.
How are they weaker? They have better equipment and more aid? You mean Israel? I think Israel is demonstrably weaker than the Israel of the past. Their better equipment and 2,000-pound bombs have not exactly helped them with any of their military goals, don't you think? People think this is like the 60s. Israel is still operating on the virtues of their military conquests of the past. Yeah, Israel, the Israeli occupying force turned from a professional army into a police force guarding settlements and beating kids for 2 decades. Yeah. What do you mean they're achieving their military goals perfectly? 37,000 dead, more to go. The fact that in spite of the heavy bombing and everything that Israel has done in Gaza, The fact that there are still rockets sometimes being launched from northern Gaza, central Gaza into Israel. The fact that Hamas is still able to re-up their numbers inside of this, inside of the Gaza Strip. And the very fact that they are still in operation in northern Gaza and in central Gaza is insane. That is an unimaginable L for this massive military. That's crazy. 8 months of bombing, 8 months of non-stop bombing, and Hamas still operates in the central Gaza area in northern Gaza. That's crazy. They haven't even been able to take out the tunnel structures to a reasonable degree. Now imagine fighting against a much better organized, much better equipped, actual standing paramilitary, standing military against a whole ass country. Like, Hezbollah is not using bathtub rockets, brother. And if your entire military apparatus is comprised of marketing managers and techno DJs that are reliant on the superior firepower that they have and sit inside a $30 million Merkava tanks waiting for the bulldozers to make way so that the tanks can go through, only to get no scope by a drone grenade or a dude popping out wearing slides and busted ass Adidas pants, dropping a grenade, avoiding the trophy system, you're cooked. Hezbollah is not using bathtub rockets, okay? They're not using sniper rifles that they made. They're not using fair trade, organic, farm-to-table sniper rifles, okay?
And unrelenting military attacks across the Strait Neve.
All right, Tarek, many thanks as always. Tarek Abu Azim outside the Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah, that's in central.
Not only is Hezbollah so far, this is BM, I really hate you, anti-Zionist Hebrew. Israel keeps insisting on escalating the northern front, and Israelis are, of course, like, Hezbollah is going too far. We have to crush them. Flatten South Lebanon. Not only has Hezbollah so far been showing restraint and desire to avoid full-scale war, but also seems to be trying to avoid targeting civilians. Pretty much all of its massive strikes so far have been precision strikes directed at military targets or barrages on evacuated areas. Now, of course, there's one other problem with that. Given the type of trees that are in the forest region of northern Israel, as far as I understand, they are infinitely more likely, because they're way more dried up, because it's not the natural ecosystem, the natural trees that would normally grow. There are a lot of wildfires or forest fires that occur as a consequence of the bombing campaigns, even though the bombing campaigns are directed at military facilities. That's another interesting, ironic situation. So there are a lot of forest fires happening in northern Israel. You can't defeat an enemy that's fighting for a righteous cause. That's what I learned from my experience in Iraq and Afghanistan. To win a war, it takes heart. That's all I had. That's why I got my silver star, but most of didn't. We knew we were fighting for a lie, and that's why America lost. I don't think it's like that. No, I think you just can't beat an enemy that has nowhere to go. That's it. If you're coming in from the outside and you're trying to fight an enemy that has nowhere else to go, there's nowhere to run, that is backed into a corner, yeah, of course, they have no way out but to fight. For example, chat, you know how the IDF has the trophy APS system that takes out RPGs? Hezbollah has the Tarallah anti-tank missile system, which is basically two Cornets strapped together to defeat the APS with two rockets in short succession. It's not the same as fighting bathtub rockets. Hezbollah has legit weapons. The war will greatly escalate. Yes. The reason why Hezbollah did not push into Israel post-October 7, even though it was a direct violation of the red lines that, like, the axis of resistance had set forth, was because of the dire constraints that the Lebanese economy had placed upon the southern Lebanese population. Hamas obviously has a civil branch as well. They care about civil governance. It's a part of their job, and therefore they have to make these calculations. And considering that the Lebanese economy is in the shitter for years now, they were like, we can't do anything about it. They are forced into a position of restraint in some ways. Having said that, however, if Israel does invade southern Lebanon, well, then that equation changes, because then Israel has brought the war to their doorstep.